Welcome to Stories Cave. Tonight, we step into the sun-drenched glamour of 1920s Hollywood, where the silver screen casts shadows as deep as its dreams. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrive at Paramount Studios, summoned by a titan of cinema to a world of lavish sets and whispered rivalries. But when a director's life is ended by a dagger's thrust, the illusion of stardom shatters, revealing a web of love, ambition, and betrayal. Join us for the Hollywood affair, crafted in homage to Agatha Christie's masterful genius, though this tale is our own. Before we begin, share in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence lights our path through these shadowed mysteries. If this tale captivates you, consider supporting Stories Cave, okay? Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The glamour of the silver screen. The sun blazed high above Paramount Studios, its relentless rays bathing the sprawling lot in a golden glow as Hercule Poirot and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, passed through the wrought iron gates. We had crossed the Atlantic at the request of Reginald Montgomery, a film director whose name adorned marquees from Piccadilly to Sunset Boulevard. His recent triumphs, The Crimson Veil, a Gothic masterpiece, and Whispers of the Thames, a brooding sensation, had solidified his status as a titan of the silver screen. Now, he had summoned Poirot's unparalleled deductive mind to consult on his latest venture, a detective film poised to redefine the genre. Thus, we found ourselves on stage 7, immersed in the electric pulse of Hollywood's golden age. The set unfurled before us like a magician's illusion, a Victorian parlor recreated with breathtaking precision. Dark mahogany panels, etched with intricate carvings, gleamed under the glow of faux gas lamps. Heavy burgundy velvet drapes framed windows that opened to painted backdrops, while a grand fireplace flickered with artificial flames, casting dancing shadows across the room. The air hummed with the mingled scents of sawdust, grease paint, keynote, testament to the alchemy of filmmaking. Poirot paused, his sharp eyes sweeping the scene with meticulous care. Hastings, he murmured, his voice low and measured. Observe how they weave illusion into truth. The precision, the artistry, is a puzzle in itself. I could only nod, awestruck. Absolutely, Poirot. It's as if they've plucked a corner of England and planted it here under the California sun. Our host approached, cutting a commanding figure amid the bustle. Reginald Montgomery's silver hair shone beneath the studio lights, his tailored suit a mark of a man accustomed to authority. His smile was warm, yet carried the weight of hard-earned confidence. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome to the beating heart of our little dream factory. We're shooting a key scene today. In your expertise, Miss Penelope Fairmont rehearsed a tender scene. Her soft voice, quivering with raw vulnerability, was a picture of delicate beauty, fair-haired with eyes that shimmered like pools of light. Yet there was a fragility to her, as if she might shatter under scrutiny. Stood her mother, Mrs. Agatha Fairmont, a formidable figure with a pinched expression and a tone that brooked no dissent. Penelope must have silence, she snapped at a passing assistant, her hands clasped tightly before her Poirot's mustache gave a subtle twitch of protector. Hastings, though perhaps too zealous, the mother's villain's borders on obsession. I murmured assent, noting the taut leanness off Mrs. Fairmont's face. She's shielding Penelope from something Hollywood's glare. Perhaps, at that moment, a ripple of excitement passed through the crew as Julian Drake strode onto the set. He was every inch the leading man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that could melt the iciest heart, and eyes that sparkled with mischievous presence, seemed to draw the light in even the most jaded. Crew members straightened as he passed. Julian exchanged a few easy words, with Evelyn eliciting a peal of laughter, and then flashed a grin and Montgomery Mintery's smile tightened ever so slightly. "Julian Drake, our star," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "He has a knack for stealing scenes, on and off camera." Julian's charm was effortless, his confidence unshakable, and yet I sensed a current of tension between him and Montgomery. The director's jaw set as Juliana lipped a line during rehearsal, earning appreciative murmurs from the crew. It was clear that Julian's talent and popularity both inspired and unsettled Montgomery, a rivalry simmering just beneath the surface, fueled by the director's pride and the actor's natural magnetism. As we continued our tour, Montgomery paused and gestured toward a lean, sallow man adjusting a set piece near the edge of the stage. "That's Jenkins, my right-hand man," he said. "He keeps both the mansion and the studio running, though I'm afraid Hollywood's glamour isn't quite to his taste." Jenkins offered a curtain nod. He wore plain work clothes, his hands rough and stained, and he seemed deeply uncomfortable amid the glamour and bustle. His eyes flicked toward Montgomery, a glance tinged with resentment, before he slipped back into the shadows, unnoticed by most. I leaned closer to Perothat Jenkins. "This fella, he's an odd duck, doesn't quite fit this glittering crowd." Perot's gaze sharpened. "He is an outsider here. Hastings, the world of stars and spectacle, is not his, and perhaps he resents those who move so easily. Within it, the quiet ones often harbor the deepest currents." The afternoon war on the set, alive with rhythm of creation. Montgomery orchestrated it all with the conductor's grace, though hints of strained surfaced a curt exchange with the cinematographer. Over a lighting angle, a script girl, stifled groan as pages were rewritten on the fly. Yet the director pressed forward, his vision unwavering, even as Julian's improvisations drew admiring glances from the cast and crew as dusk crept over the lot. Painting dusky in hues of amber and violet, the crew packed away their tools, their chatter fading into the evening breeze. Montgomery turned to us, his expression genial. "Gentlemen, won't hear of you staying anywhere but my home. It's a short drive into the hills, and I'd be delighted to have you as my guests." Poy inclined his head with a gracious nod. "A kind offer, monsieur, we shall accept with gratitude." The journey to Montgomery's estate wound through the Hollywood hills, the road flanked by eucalyptus trees that rustled in the twilight. At last the mansion emerged, a majestic sprawl of pale stone and towering windows, its silhouette softened by sprawling gardens. Fountains spurbled in the courtyard, their spray glinting like diamonds. Peacocks paraded across the grass, their calls echoing faintly. Stepping inside, we were greeted by opulence. Polished marble floors stretched beneath evaded ceiling. Chandeliers cast prisms of light, and walls bore oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Vases brimmed with fresh roses, their perfume blending with the earthy scent of aged wood. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister gleaming under the touch of countless hands. Montgomery gestured expansively. "Retreat from the madness of the studio here. We can discuss the film in peace and perhaps uncover inspiration." In the quiet, Poirot glanced around the room, his expression thoughtful. "This house has character, Mr. Montgomery. I imagine it has witnessed many stories over the years." Montgomery chuckled, his tone light but appreciative. "Indeed, it has, Muzurand. I hope it will inspire many more. I have planned an intimate dinner with some of my brightest stars in your honor. Of course, we shall meet in the dining room at 8 o'clock sharp." We're ushered to our rooms, sumptuous suites with views of moonlit lawns. There, heavy with jasmine. Poirot paused by his window, gazing out as the night settled over the estate. "There is an interesting dynamic among our hosts. Hastings, I sense a certain undercurrent." I smiled, loosening my tie. "Their artists, plural, passionate, and perhaps a bit dramatic, is to be expected. Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, perhaps, but I shall observe with interested caution. Soon overtook me the day's events swirling in my mind, the glamour of. The film set the intriguing personalities, and Poirot was quiet. Observations little did I know that our stay at Montgomery's mansion would soon take an unexpected turn. Chapter 2. A dinner to remember. Twilight had deepened by the time Poirot and I made our way down to the dining hall of Reginald Montgomery's Cest. The Hollywood hills were now mere shadows. Beyond the tall windows, in Thier carried a faint scent of jasmine from the gardens, blending with the warm, inviting notes of polished wood and candle wax. After the whirlwind of the film studio, I was rather looking forward to a quiet evening though. Knowing Poirot, I suspected he saw more in this gathering than a simple meal. Moni, Poirot murmured as he adjusted his bow tie with that meticulous precision of his observed, well, a dinner is a canvas, each stroke reveals more than it seems. I couldn't help but grin, brushing a hand over my jacket to smooth it. You'll find intrigue in a bowl of soup. Poirot, it's just film folk and good food. His eyes twinkled faintly, but he said nothing more as we entered the dining room. And what a room it was! A long mahogany table stretched beneath a chandelier that glittered like a cascade of diamonds, casting a soft golden glow over easel-ware, and delicate porcelain candles flickered along the table, their light dancing across the faces of the guests. Already seated, the walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings, stern ancestors, no doubt keeping a watchful eye on the proceedings. A grand fireplace crackled softly, adding a cozy warmth to the center. Reginald Montgomery sat at the head of the table, looking every bit the Hollywood mogul in his tailored dinner jacket. His silver hair catching the light, he raised a glass of wine and smiled broadly to our guests. MC Point, Captain Hastings, into the art. We cracked together, we all echoed the toast, and I settled into my chair beside Poirot. Taking in the company to Montgomery's right was Kiva Linsler, the actress I'd seen on set earlier. She was even more striking up close, with her dark hair swept into an elegant style and a sapphire gown that shimmered with every movement. Her smile was captivating, though there was a sharpness to her gaze that made me think she was not one to be trifled with. Tort, she said with a playful lilt, though Reggie, your art does keep us on a tight leash. Montgomery laughed, but I noticed high size, narrow, just a fraction discipline. Evelyn is the soul of genius, you thrive under it. Her chafe, perhaps, she replied, her lips curving into a sly smile. Some of us prefer a little freedom. At that, Julian Drake, seated across from Evelyn, leaned in with a roguish grin. Freedom is the secret to inspiration, isn't it? Fellini, find the best performances come when the heart leads, not the script. Montgomery's jaw tightened, and yet Julian, the script is what brings ordardo chaos. Not all of us can improvise our way through life. Julian's eyes sparkled. Perhaps not, but some of us make it look rather good. Villain laughed, her gaze flicking between the two men. Gentlemen, must I remind, youth camera loves a little chaos. It keeps things interesting. Monterey's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. The camera, my dear loves what I tell it to love. Penelope Fairmont, seated beside her mother, tried to join in. I think the camera loves sincerity most of all, she said softly, glancing shilly at Montgomery. Montgomery's expression softened. At you have a rare gift, Penelope. The screen will adore you. Agatha Fairmont stiffened, her lips pressed into a thin line. A gift that merits more than a minor part, surely, she said. Her voice clipped. The story dictates the roles, madam. Her time will come. Montgomery replied, his neckline. Penelope's cheeks flushed. I'm just happy to be here, Mr. Montgomery. Truly. Her mother's gaze hardened. Gratitude is healed well and good, but ambition is better. Julian, ever the charmer, turned his attention to Evelyn. Tell me, Evelyn, do you find ambition attractive, or is it charm that wins the day? Evelyn arched an eyebrow. It's a dangerous question, Julian. I suppose it depends on the man. Montgomery interjected. Ambition builds empires, charm. Morally antitons. The court Julian raised his glass in a mock salutathon. May we all be emperors tonight, Victor. Langley, a lean figure with a sardonic smirk, introduced earlier by Montgomery. As the screenwriter watched the exchange with a re-smile to ampersand their courts, may the best man win. Pooh leaned toward me, voice low, observe. Hastings, the rivalry, it is not only for the camera. There are many performances done. I nodded, noting the glances exchanged around the table. Penelope's eyes lingered on Montgomery, her admiration clear, while her mother's disapproval was palpable. Evelyn seemed to bask in the attention, her laughter ringing out as deftly navigated the verbal sparring between Julian and Montgomery. The main course was cleared. The conversation shifted toward the film's script. Victor Langley, lounging at the can, swirled his wine and fixed Montgomery with a sardonic smile. Tell me, Reginald, how many more times will you rewrite the ending before you finally let the writer have his say? Montgomery's eyes narrowed. A director's job is to shape the story. But Victor, I trust you'll remember that the next time you deliver pages. At the 11th hour, Victor's tone sharpened. Perhaps if you didn't change your mind every day, I wouldn't have to. But then perhaps you enjoy chaos so long as you can play the hero who saves the day. A tense silence fell. Evelyn glanced at Between. Them lips parted as if to intervene, but Julian beat her to it, grinning. Pay to watch you to duel with typewriters. Montgomery forced a laugh. I prefer a sharper weapon. Victor leaned forward, his voice low, careful. Reginald, sometimes the pen is sharper than the sword or the director's tongue. Montgomery's face darkened, but he said nothing, and the conversation awkwardly shifted back to lighter topics. Yet the undercurrent of animosity lingered, and I noticed that Victor's gaze lingered on Montgomery for a moment too long, his jaw clenched as if holding back a final damning word. Just then the door swung open, and Jenkins, the handyman from the set, stepped in. He looked terribly out of place in his workload, carrying a small toolbox bag. Pardon, sir, he said to Montgomery, his voice gruff. The window in Study's jammed thought. I'd see to it before it worsens. Montgomery waved him off curtly. Very well, but make it quick. Jenkins nodded and slipped away, though not before High's eyes flicked briefly toward Evelyn. I wondered if there was some history there, but it seemed trivial, probably just a passing glance. Curious timing. I whispered to Poirot, "We Hastings," he replied, his gaze still on the door. A man of tools among the glitter of stars. He sees more than he speaks. I think he shrugged. Poirot always did have a way of making the mundane seem mysterious. The meal progressed, and with it, the conversation flowed, a mix of Hollywood gossip, witty repartee, and the occasional sharp remark. Evelyn teased Montgomery about the script, her tone light, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. If you change my lines one more time, Reggie, I'll start improvising in French, she said with a laugh. Montgomery chuckled, though his eyes betrayed a hint of irritation. The script evolves, Evelyn. It's the nature of the beast. Penelope, bless her, tried to chime in with a compliment about the food, but her voice was so soft it was nearly lost in the chatter. Mrs. Fairmont, on the other hand, made no effort to hide her disdain. Such extravagance for simple, canish, muttered, though loud enough for all to hear. Langley, meanwhile, seemed content. Taught his cryptic comments. Like every scene has its shadows, drawing puzzled looks from me and sharp glances from Montgomery. I couldn't tell if he was being profound or just trying to stir the pot. As the main course gave way to dessert, a decadent chocolate torte that melted on the tongue, the atmosphere seemed to shift. Jenkins reappeared, briefly lingering by the door with his toolbox, eyes darting around the room before he vanished again. Evelyn's laughter, which had been so bright earlier, now sounded a touch forced, and Mrs. Fairmont's posture grew even stiffer. If that were possible, Langley's gaze sharpened, as if he were waiting for something to happen. Poole whispered faintly, his expression unreal. The air is charged. Hastings beneath the glamour lies a tangle of threads. I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but before I could ask, Montgomery rose, his glass aloft. A splendid evening, friends. Rest well. Tomorrow we return to the set. The guests began to disperse. Evelyn with a graceful nod, Julian lingering to exchange a few last words with the Penelope, casting a wistful glance at Montgomery, and Langley with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jenkins, he noticed, was nowhere to be seen as we made our way to the hall. I stifled, well, Poirot, what's your verdict on the evening? He paused, his eyes distant as he glanced back toward the dining room. The players have taken their positions. Hastings' ambition, envy, secrets, they stirring at the surface. The stage is set. I chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. Real, turn a dinner into a drama. Yet, old chap, perhaps, he said softly, his voice almost a whisper, but the curtain has not yet fallen. We climbed the grand staircase to our rooms, some mansion's silence settling around us like a heavy blanket. They couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity at Poirot's words, but exhaustion won out whatever mysteries he saw in the evening's events. They could wait until morning. For now, I was contento. Let the night's glamour linger in my dreams, unaware of the shadows that waited just beyond the dawn. Chapter 3. The body in the study type. First rays of morning crept over the Hollywood hills, gilding the windows of Montgomery's mansion and stirring their household from its uneasy sleep. I had spent a restless night in my guest suit. Teeth, echoes of the previous evening's tensions replaying in my mind. The house was quiet, eerily so, after Thalatory and sharp words that had filled it. Just hours before, I was just finishing my shave when Asher's scream shattered the calm. The sound came from below, urgent and unmistakable. I rushed into the corridor, colliding with Poirot, who emerged from his own room, already immaculate and alert. That was from the study, mon ami, he said, his eyes narrowed with concern. We hurried down the grand staircase, echo of our footsteps joined by the frantic patter of the housemaid, Mrs. Lane. She stood in the open doorway of chastity, her face ashen, hands trembling violently. Sir, oh sir, it's Montgomery, she sobbed, clutching the doorframe for support. Poirot stepped forward, his manner gentle but commanding courage. Madame, please let us see. We entered the study, a room of masculine elegance, lined with dark wood and adorned with film posters and heavy velvet curtains. The morning sun filtered through the windows, illuminating the scene of horror. At the great mahogany desk, Reginald Montgomery sat, slumped over his silver hair, stark against the blood staining his starched shirt. An ornithetiker was buried deep in his chest, its jeweled hilt catching the light. A half-some smoked cigar rested in the ashtray. Its smoke long since faded in a faint, unfamiliar scent. Something sweet and exotic lingered in the air. I drew a sharp breath. Good heavens, Poirot, he's been murdered. Poirot's gaze swept the room, missing nothing. You see, Hastings' final act has been played. Mrs. Lane's sobs grew ludary. Only came in to tidy, sir, as I do every morning upon my arrival, and I found him just like that. Poirot offered her his handkerchief. You are most brave, Madame Apolles. Compose yourself in the kitchen. Hastings, see that she is comfortable, then return it. Once I led the shaken maid away, then hurried back to find Poirot already examining Vesey. He moved with careful precision, noting the neatly arranged Mellon documents, Montgomery's glasses in there. Rightful placed the pen laying on a stack of scripts, as if the director would come back at any minute to finish. his work. The window behind the desk was slightly ajar, letting in a cool breeze. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. No sign of a struggle. The blow was swift, deliberate. The window opened, but no footprints below our murderer, his clever Hastings. Within the hour, the police descended upon the mansion, uniformed officers cording off the study, photographers capturing the grim tableau in a defaced corner. Kneeling beside Thibodeau, the coroner, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his hawkish nose, examined Montgomery's stiffened limbs and the pooling of blood beneath his skin. Rigor mortis is well advanced, he announced, checking. His pocket watch death occurred between midnight and 3 o'clock. This morning, the liver mortisepitorin suggests he never left this chair after the fatal strike. Poole nodded, absorbing the details. Mercy Doctor, the lead detective. Inspector Harold Morrison arrived shortly after, a broad-shouldered man with a clipped mustache and a demeanor that mixed skepticism with grudging respect for Poirot's reputation. Miss Poole, Morrison said, tipping his hat. Read your case files. Suppose you'll want to meddle in my investigation. His eyes twinkled. Nan, Inspector, I merely observe, but as such, you recall all who attended last night's dinner. The killer is among them. Police telephoned and dispatched cars, and by early afternoon, the drawing room was once again the stage for a most unusual gathering. The first to arrive was Velen Street Claire, sweeping through the doors in a tailored suit and dark glasses. Her usual poise, now tinged with genuine distress, removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes, and cast a weary glance. The assembled officers, before focusing on Poole. Is it true, Miss Poole, is Reginald? Her voice faltered. Poirot offered a gentle nod. I am afraid so, mademoiselle. Please, have a seat. Julian Drake followed soon after, striding in with the energy of a man accustomed to command attention. He looked around, jaw set, and muttered, Hollywood's lost its king. He took a seat near Evelyn, but his gazelle was restless, flicking from Poirot to the unformed officers, and back shortly behind him came Penelope Fairmont, and her mother Penelope's face was pale, hands twisting a handkerchief, while Mrs. Agatha Fairmont's lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Hope this will not take long, Mrs. Fairmont said sharply, as if the forced offer will alone could banish unpleasantness. Penelope, however, looked desperately at Poirot. I can't believe it, he was so kind to me, she whispered. Victor Langley, Fest screenwriter, entered. With a languid air, his suit immaculate, his expression unreal, he offered a sardonic smile. So the curtain falsy. Suppose we're all suspects now. Inspector Morrison, who stood by the fireplace, gave a curt nod to Mr. Langley, please. Take a seat and wait for further instructions. Last to arrive was Jenkins. He entered quietly, almost apologetically, removing his cap. As he stepped into the room, he wore his best jacket, though it still bore the faint scent of oil and sawdust. Jenkins hesitated near the door, but Poirot beckoned him in with a reassuring gesture. Jenkins, you were a part of Tay household last night and present around dinner time. Please join us. Poirot's tone was warm, and Jenkins nodded, taking a seat at the end of the row, his posture stiff but attentive. For a moment, the group sat in uneasy silence, the only sound the ticking oft grandfather clock in the hall. Poirot stood at the center, his presence seconded Madame's share. I regret the necessity of this summons. The police have determined that Reginald Montgomery was murdered between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning. As you are all present at dinner, it is essential that you remain until the truth is uncovered. Each of you will be interviewed in turn. Inspector Morrison stepped forward, his notebook ready. You'll all be asked to account for your whereabouts and activities after dinner last night, and let me be clear, no one leaves until I say so. A ripple of protest passed through the group. Mrs. Fairmont huffed, Julian bristled, and Victor rolled his eyes, but none dared defy the inspector's authority. Poirot's gaze swept the room, pausing on each face. Remember, the truth is a way of revealing itself even when we least expect it. For now, I ask only for your patience and your candor. Jenkins, seated quietly among the luminaries, seemed almost invisible, yet his presence felt oddly vital, a humble thread in the intricate tapestry of this Hollywood tragedy. As I watched, my mind raced, marveling at Poirot's calm certainty. Whoever had struck down Montgomery, I knew my friend would unravel the mystery with his inimitable finesse. 4. The interviews began. Afternoon sunlight cast long, burnished shafts through the leaded glass of Montgomery's study, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air, ghostly reminders of the morning's violence. The room, though now cleared of fits, a tragic occupant retains the somber gravity of recent events. The red stand-in. The antique desk remained as a mute testament to the horror that had unfolded. Inspector Morrison consulted his notebook with the brisk efficiency I'd come to expect from American police. "We'll isolate them," he declared, his voice clipped. "Alibis, motivus opportunis. Someone will let slip a detail that points to." The culprit. Poirot inclined his head with that peculiar precision of his mais-certainement. "Spectre. Yet in Hollywood, the artifice does not end when the curtain falls. Here, even in the shadow of death, performance persists. We must be attuned, not only to what is spoken, but to the silences between words, truths concealed beneath the veneer." Morrison's lips curled into a smiley O. "May have your subtleties, Poirot. I will concern myself with the facts. Let us begin with the staff. In my experience, those who serve often see more thanthos. They serve." Poirot inclined his head, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Very well, Inspector. Let us peel back the layers of this particular drama, one player at a time." I found myself rather impressed by Morrison's practical approach, though I suspected Poirot would find far more in these interviews than mere facts and alibis. Mrs. Lane sat stiffly at the kitchen table, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Morning's shocking discovery had left her pale and shaking, yet she answered their questions with the careful precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime working for Hollywood's elite. "I don't live here at the house, sir," she explained to Morrison's questioning, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I go home to my own place in town every night after I finish up with dinner service, come back at 6 sharp every morning to get breakfast started." "And last night?" Poirot asked gently, his head tilted to one side in that curious manner of his. "Same as always, sir. Finished cleaning up the dining room around 11 o'clock, locked up tight like Mr. Montgomery always wanted, and caught the streetcar home. Got back this morning at 6 o'clock. On the dot, let myself in through the kitchen, went straight to the study to dust before breakfast." Her voice got, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. "Well, you know what? I found Morrison's pencil scratched across his notepad. You locked up everything. Every door and window, sir. Front door, back door, those fancy French doors, out of the patio. Mr. Montgomery was real particular about keeping things secure. Other help, Mr. Henley, who does the gardens, and Mr. Briggs, the chauffeur, they only got keys to. The garage and tool sheds, not the main house." Poirot leaned forward with interest, his small hands clasped before him. "At Jenkins, madame. He has the access to the house eyes." Mrs. Lane's composure wavered. "Well, sure he does. Jenkins has been with my Montgomery, going on 15 years now. They go way back from before. Mr. Montgomery, Medite, big in pictures. He takes care of all the repairs and such, both here and down at the studio. He's the only one of U.S. Jewel. Actually lives on the property. Got that little guest house out back. Works all hours. That one, and Mr. Montgomery trusted him completely." "Was he working late last night?" Morrison pressed. "Saw him in the study just before I left fooling with that darn window again. Things always sticky. But Montgomery was still at his desk, going over some papers. Poirot's eyebrows rose with subtle interest, and he tilted his head like an inquisitive bird. "What is your impression of this Jenkins, madame? A man of good character, perhaps?" Mrs. Lane glanced nervously toward the door as if worried about being overheard. "He's always been well devoted to Mr. Montgomery, you understand." But lately she had dropped her voice. "There's been talk around here about some changes that got Kingins all worked up kills." Deasmo asked. Dan caught himself. "Forgive me, what kind of changes the engagement, sir?" Her words were barely a whisper now. I saw Poole and Morrison exchange glances. This was clearly news to both of them. Mr. Montgomery and Miss Esty Clare had been secretly engaged for months, planning to announce it at the premiere. Of course, she was going to move in here after they tied the knot. But Jenkins, well, he can't stand that woman in between you and me. She's a real piece of work when the cameras ain't rolling. Poor Mr. Drake doesn't even know what hit him. Morrison looked up sharply. "How's Thido?" "It's the mess say. Mr. Drake's been crazy about Miss St. Clair for near 2 years. Now, ever since they worked together, the picture they shot in Italy, can't recall the name word is they wearing item, but she kept it hush-hush, probably waiting for something better to come along. And sure enough, along comes Mr. Montgomery, the only man in Hollywood who could make her a real star that daemonly looks out for number one. If you ask me, Pooh studied her with penetrating interest. His gray eyes, missing nothing you, seemed to have strong feelings about this situation, madame." Mrs. Lane's eyes flashed with indignation where Montgomery was a gentleman. He didn't deserve to be used like that. Jenkins saw, too, in between you and me. I think it tore him up, watching his old friend fall for someone like her. I found myself rather taken back by the woman's vehemence. In England household, staff rarely spoke so openly about their employers' private affairs, but Americans seem to have different notions of bootsuk things. Poole, however, appeared to find her candor most illuminating. Trenches, he murmured more to himself than to us. The affairs of the heart, they make for the most dangerous of motives. Nona Jenkins was waiting for us in his domain, the tool shed behind the mansion. It was an orderly little space, meticulously arranged like a military quarters depot. Every wrench, hammer, and screwdriver hung in precise formation on pegboards, lining the walls, a place where Suze had clearly never been permitted entry. He stood stiffly, a heavy wrench in one hand. Though he didn't appear to be working, his discomfort was plain and understandable. A man like Jenkins was far more used to being invisible than interrogated. "I was fixing that damned window in the study," said, voice gruff and dumplish, been sticking for weeks. Drove Mr. Montgomery, half mad, told me during dinner to finally see to it proper. Morrison consulted his notebook with time. "Did you finish the work? I worked on it during dinner." Like he escaped, got it open, but the frame wasn't catching right. Had to come back after dinner to tighten the fittings around 11:15, maybe 11:30. Mr. Montgomery was still at his desk, working on some script pages. I told him it was done and left through the kitchen. Merz Lane was just finishing up. Poirot tilted his head hands, clasp pad behind his back. "You have been with Miss Montgomery a long time." Nespa Jenkins's jaw tightened. 15 years this coming Christmas. We both came from the same place, same dreams, even dirt poor, nobody's from Clometry. To make something out of nothing. There was a tremor beneath his words, something old and raw, like a scar reopened. We came out here in 1920, Jenkins continent. 2 farm boys with stars in our eyes and holes in our shoes, slept in floof houses, shared cold beans out of the can. We worked whatever jobs we could find. But Reggie Montgomery, he had the charm, could talk his way into anything, kept the lights running. While he lit up the town, there was no missing the bitterness in his voice now. I exchanged a glance with Poirot. Jenkins wasn't just a servant. He was a man who'd watched someone else live his dream. Morrison leaned forward. And now you work for him, Jenkins. Gave a dry laugh. Started out as partners. Ended up as his handyman. Life's funny. That way. Poirot's eyes narrowed just slightly in thus transformation of your friendship. It has not sat easily with you. Jenkins set the wrench down carefully on the workbench. His movement, slow and deliberation. Spent 15 years watching someone else live the life you were supposed to have. See how it sits with you, but I did my job, always have. There was a quiet intensity. In his words, that unsettled me after you completed your work. The second time, Poirot said, did you see anyone else on the property? Jenkins scratched the back of his neck. Well, I noticed a car still in the driveway I left. Looked like Langley's. Pierce Arrow, though I couldn't say for certain, just caught the chrome flashing in the street lamp as I was heading to the streetcar. Could have been anyone's, I guess. Poole nodded slowly, and the other guest, did you notice anything odd, any tensions? Jenkins grimaced. Drake's not bad for us actors. Go arrogant, but that's standard. But that's Claire woman. He shook his head with something close to disgust. She's poison. Had Julian wrapped around her finger for 2 years. Now she's turned it on Montgomery. She gets bored quick, always sniffing around. Come for the next opportunity, and with Montgomery's money troubles, Ericon, she was getting ready to jump ship. Pooh bowed his head slightly. Mercy moved Jenkins. You have been most helpful. As we stepped out of the shed and bekindled the dappled California sunlight, I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. Good Lord. Kiro, I said quietly to friends, come out here together, dreaming. The same dream, and only one of them makes it. Poirot's eyes were on the house women know me, and the other is left behind to fix jammed windows and leaking pipes. Boutry member Jenkins had access motive, and perhaps a heart full of silent grievances. He did seem genuinely bitter. I stayed still. He left the house before midnight, and he says Montgomery was alive. Poirot gave me a small, knowing smile. Yes, says. So, but consider, he claims to have left through the kitchen just as Mrs. Lane was cleaning up. I frowned. Mrs. Lane didn't mention anything exactly, Poirot said softly. Perhaps, or Jenkins is more than just the man who fixed the window. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been closest to us the longest. I shuddered slightly, thinking of that bitterness in Jenkins's voice when he spoke of watching someone else live the life he'd wanted. In my experience, such long festering grievances could indeed lead to desperate acts. Victor Langley was waiting for us in Montgomery's library, a room that Ryer have cultivated. Taste and quiet expense, with floor-to-ceiling shelves, polished wooden, the smell of old books, and expensive scars. Langley, of course, looked perfectly at home in it. He lounged in a wingback chair, like a man with nowhere particular to be in awe. The time in the world Tonejoy, ate a crystal tumbler of brandy, glinted in his hand. Rather early for such indulgence. I thought, though, perhaps, the death of one's producer justified a morning drink. Still, I couldn't shake the impression that it was less about grief than habit. Yes, I stayed late, he said, without waiting for the question, swirling the amber liquid with practiced ease original. And I had unfinished business script revisions, money matters, the usual creative disputes that can't wait until morning. Morrison, who I was beginning to suspect the subtlety of a brick, glanced up from his notepad. That argument at dinner didn't sound like script revisions. Victor smiled thinly, and I caught a flicker of steel beneath his polished exterior. In Hollywood, Inspector, everything is personal. Reginald owed me money, a good deal of it for work I did without credit on his last 3 pictures. I was growing rather tired of being his silent partner, tired enough to kill him. Morris honest. With his usual delicacy, Victor chuckled and took a sip of his drink. Dead men don't pay debts, Inspector. I'm not in the business of throwing away investments. Poirot leaned forward slightly, that familiar gleam in his eye. but you had to throw leverage. Know something you believed more profitable than violence of Victor's expression. Didn't change, but I saw him shift slightly in his Chair Jingle's engagement to Evelyn Slayer. He thought no one knew he was terrified Julian. Drake would find out before. The press junket would have been bad for business. The scorned leading man and the ambitious ingenue, not exactly a recipe for a smooth premiere. Poirot murmured, "So you used this knowledge to secure your repayment in foreman as currency, monsieur." Poor, especially in this town, his eyes glinted with something not unlike pride. I told Reginald I'd keep quiet in exchange for what he owed me and a producer credit on his next film. We're negotiating terms when I left. And what time was that, Morrison? Asked it, scratching at his notepad. Around 12:30. Maybe a little closer to 1. We lost track halftime. I glanced at Pua, who gave no visible sign of what he thought, but I'd learned by now that his silence often said more than his words. Morrison kept going. "Did you see anyone else in the house? Jenkins, I suppose, skulking about Assaways? Though we didn't cross paths, and when I was leaving, thought I saw Simeon in the conservatory pool, perked up. A man, a woman, Victor, paused. The brandy hovered halfway to his lips. Couldn't say it was dark, wasn't paying attention. It's a curious detail to notice if you weren't looking," Poirot said. Lightly. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Old habit." "I noticed things comes with the profession, and when you left," Poirot continued, "Mr. Montgomery, he was still very much so, sloshed, irritable, but alive, muttering about how he had to sort things out before morning." Victor's smile returned, dry and hollowy. Assumed he meant our little arrangement as we stepped out into the hallway. I found myself frowning lamely. Had the easy charm of a man too used to being right, too comfortable pulling strings in the shadows. Thinks rather highly of himself, that one night said. Once we were out of earshot. Blackmails. The man drinks his liquor and calls it a negotiation. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. He's intelligent, calculated, but he let something slip. Hastingsy raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "You recall, Hastings, that Reginald Montgomery was not drunk during dinner. Tired, perhaps distracted, but his mind was clear." "Yes, I noticed that too, and yet, K. Langley insists he left him drunk and agitated sometime after midnight," Poirot said quietly. "It is possible. Montgomery began drinking later alone, but I do not think so. That is, no doubt, a desperate man prepares to confront his debts, and Langley also claims they lost track of time during their negotiation. God, a man so concerned with debts does not lose track of time speechily, not when trying to secure a producer credit. You think he's lying? Think Manami that Ms. Langley sees himself as a man above consequences, but even men who trade in secrets meaties get which ones they've already sold. I couldn't argue with that, and yet for all his arrogance, I couldn't help but feel Langley was more snake than killer still snakes bite, don't they? Are you captivated by the mysteries of Stories Cafe?" Evelyn St. Clair was in Montgomery's drawing room, seated with artful poise on a velvet sofa. She wore black, a choice both fitting, and I couldn't help but feel deliberately selected to enhance her already striking beauty. Her composure under the circumstances was almost too perfect. "I went straight home after dinner," she said, her voice low, carefully measured. "I have a small place in Beverly Hills. I was alone all evening, trying to make sense of everything Ginsbert." Morrison looked up from his notepad with the brisk air of a man who thought emotion. "A tiresome obstacle, no servants, no visitors. I gave my maid the evening off. I need time to think about Reginald, about our future together." Her voice caught delicately, and she dabbed at her eyes with a laced Ketchafiro, regarded her with that focused intensity of his gray eyes, taking in every tremor, every choice of word, every pause. "You were close to Moon Montgomery, mademoiselle?" he asked gently. "We were secretly engaged," Evelyn murmured. "Had been For 3 months, we planned to announce it once the film wrapped. She looked up, eyes brimming with the grief that seemed too exquisitely controlled. I loved him, truly, despite what people assume about our professional connection. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Who else knew about the engagement? No one. We were very discreet. Pio Plio, ready gossip. That I'm just another ambitious actress, using men to climb the ladder. She flushed prettily. Didn't want to give them more ammunition. I must admit, I found myself affected by her display. There was something undeniably vulnerable about her, something that made a fellow want to believe her. And yet, from the corner of my eye, I caught peas, mustard sandwich. Ever so slightly, never a good sign for the person being questioned. You said, people might misinterpret your professional relationships. Poirot said, have there been complications with other gentlemen? Her mask slipped only briefly. Julian, Mr. Drake, whose persistent way, worked together in Italy. He helped me get started. I was grateful, but he mistook that for something deeper. And how? Did you respond to his attentions? Morrison asked, his tone a bit clipped. Now, perhaps irritated, she was keeping her focus on. Pee-wee was kind, but firm. Julian is very charming, but I never encouraged anything professional courtesy. She twisted the handkerchief again, the only sign of tension once Reginald and I began seeing each other. I had to be even more careful. William would have been devastated if he'd found out. Poirot leaned in slightly. His gaze unwavering. You feared his reaction. Julian has an intense nature. He convinced himself we shared a grand romance that never existed if he discovered my engagement. She gave a shudder. I don't know what he might have done. Were you planning to tell him? Eventually Morrison asked a tacit announcement. Yes, but I was dreading it. Julian can be vindictive. I worried he might try to damage Reginald's career, or worse, did Monsieur Montgomery share these fears? Beau asked more quietly now. She hesitated just for a moment. Something flickered behind her eyes. Tiny crack in their glass horizon. I saw him see it lately. Reginald had been distracted. I thought perhaps he was worried about Julian, or maybe she trailed off, her lower lip trembling with what seemed like genuine uncertainty. Yes, mademoiselle. Poirot prompted. Maybe he was having second thoughts about us. He kept working late, avoided our usual dinners. I even wondered if there might be someone else. Her voice faltered. Another woman. The thought, it haunted. Mew confronted him. Morrison asked. His pen poised. I tried, but he kept brushing it off, saying we'd talk after the film wrapped. But I knew something had changed. No, the tears came in earnest, gliding down her cheeks with practiced elegancy. Was losing him just when I thought I'd found something real. Stepped out into the corridor, and I glanced back at the room where she sat, the very picture of tragic glamour. Poor girl, it's murmured. Seems genuinely broken-hearted. And if Montgomery really was pulling away, mon ami, Poirot said softly. But it is often in the smallest things that truth slips out. He paused and adjusted a cufflink with unnecessary precision. I waited. When Poirot paused like that, it usually meant something devastating was about to follow you. Recall Hastings? He said at last. She claimed she went straight home and was alone all night. Yes, and yet, he continued, she told us she had not seen Reginald in days, that he had been distant, that he was avoiding her. Right, I said, not seeing the trap yet, but she also claimed she was trying to make sense of everything that night about their future, about what he said to her. Poirot said, his voice suddenly colder. She implied they had spoken that very evening. I blinked. So if she was home all night after the dinner and he was in his study, then when Mynheer did they speak, there was a beat of silence. I swallowed. You think she was lying? Think Hastings that Mademoiselle Sinclair is a most accomplished actress, both on screen and off. Question is, what role is she playing now? Julian Drake was waiting in Montgomery's billiards room, pacing like a caged animal among the green baize tables and polished cues. The midday light cut sharp angles through the tall windows, catching on the brass fixtures and the fire in his eyes. His famously handsome features were tight with strain, the usual Hollywood charm stripped away, revealing raw nerves beneath. When Poole and Morrison entered Drector, Ona's eyes blazing with frustration and something else. Desperation, perhaps. This is absolutely ridiculous, he snapped. You can't seriously think had anything to do with Reginald's death. Morrison boffed. Consulted his notebook with his usual brusque calm. Where were you last night after the dinner at my hotel, the Garden of Alehi? Said it, as though daring us to question it. I left after dinner and stayed in my suite the rest of the night. Can anyone confirm that? Julian hesitated, ran a hand through his impeccably styled hair. The gesture looked almost rehearsed, and yet there it was, the first cracked nth polished facade. I ordered room service around 11 o'clock. The waiter should remember. I also made a few calls to my agent in New York, to a producer in Palm Springs, about a new picture. His voice wavered slightly, and I couldn't tell whether it was guilt or simple nerves that made him falter. Poirot stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. And you did not return here, not even for a moment. No, Julian snapped. Why would I? Poirot tilted his head, bird-like. Perhaps you hoped to speak with Moo Montgomery privately. You were seen looking displeased during dinner. Displeased? Julian gave a bitter laugh. Just watch the woman I love hang on another man's every word while pretending I didn't exist. Yes, I was distressed. You speak of Mademoiselle Sinclair, Poirot. Gently, Julian resumed his pacing, quicker now, his fists clenching and unclenching as though he might strike something. Evelyn and I worked together in Italy 2 years ago, the Eternal City. We were close, more than close. It wasn't just about the film. I thought we had something real, but she did not share those feelings. Poirot asked softly. She said she did. Julian's voice dropped. Were lovers. I helped her, gave her introductions, vouched for her talent. She don't be where she is without me. And yet, she moved on to Musu Montgomery. Pooh murmured. Julian's jaw flexed. Montgomery promised her the lead in his new picture. And God knows what else I saw it happening. The calculation behind her smile, the weighing of opportunity. She knew he was a mess, but he still had power. What kind of mess? Morrison asked. Julian's eyes narrowed. Montgomery was drowning in debt. His last 2 pictures flopped, and he'd started borrowing from private lenders, bad ones, people you didn't cross. He was living on borrowed time, and not just figuratively on. Did you tell Miss Sinclair? He looked away. I tried to warn Evelyn. She wouldn't listen. Thought it was too good an opportunity. Okay, but the man was collapsing under the weight of his own ego, and Badil's Poirot's voice was calm. Did you ever confront King? Him? Julian gave a smiling, pleasant smile. I may have hinted that his finances weren't as private as he thought. That word was spreading, that it might reflect badly on his leading Lady Pooh's eyebrows lifted slightly. That sounds rather like a threat. Sure, was trying to protect her, Julian said. His voice, rose-edged with anger. Montgomery was dragging everyone around him down. Evelyn, included Morrison, scribbled furiously. And now he's dead, and Evelyn is no longer tied to him. Julian stopped pacing and stared at Morrison, jaw clenched there. You accusing me of something? I'm observing that. His death comes at a very convenient moment for a number of people. Julian let out a short, mirthless laugh. You don't know Evelyn. She doesn't need a tragedy to move on. She does it all the time. She's probably already calculating her next conquest. Another director, Erica, producer, whoever's in a position to open the next door for her to be the perfect husband. He stopped himself, his eyes narrowed. So you knew? Julian turned slowly with the engagement. Poirot said gently. You've been pretending not to. No, all day, Mr. Drake, but your hatred, it's too personal to be about a simple rivalry for affection. Tell me the truth. You knew she was engaged too, Montgomery? Julian stared at him, something cracking in his eyes. Yes, he said at last, voice low. I knew, found out 3 days ago. She didn't tell me. I overheard it at the studio, some hairdresser whispering it in the powder room. Evelyn was going to announce it at the premiere. And how did that make you feel? Poole asked. Quietly, Julian laughed again, an ugly, brittle sound. Like a damned fool, like every moment we'd shared meant nothing. I gave her everything I had, and she was planning to marry that old fool Morrison. Scribbled something, and yet, Poirot said, you still love her. Julian's mouth twitched. I don't know what I feel in a more love-hate. They're two sides of the same coin, aren't they? Who studied him carefully? And so you came last night, you watched, you saw them together. You knew she had chosen another. But she had, Julian whispered, but way she looked at me. Even then, part of me thought, she might still change her mind. Poirot's voice was calm. But then you left. You went home. I did. Julian said fiercely, I didn't kill him. I wanted Tompu. I didn't silence. Morrison closed his notebook. That's all for now, Mr. Drake. I found myself unexpectedly moved by the pain in his voice, whatever his faults. Man's affection seemed sincere, however poorly returned. We left the billiards room. I glanced at Poirot. You believe him? Poole clasped his hands behind his back, walking slowly. Kay, he is a man betrayed, but also a man with knowledge of Montgomery's debts. Kay, Evelyn's ambitions, and he claims to have warned her, protected her. I nodded. Yet, she said it was all professional, that she had to fend off his affections. Just so, Poirot murmured. It seems, my that someone is miscasting their role in this production, either Mademoiselle Sinclair or Miss Drake. And if we listen closely, Tres Intonement, I believe the truth will soon reveal itself. He pondered this as we walked down the corridor. In my experience, when it came to matters of the heart, the truth was Saffin, the first casualty in Hollywood, where everything was performance. Separating reality from illusion seemed nearly impossible. We found Penelope Fairmont in the conservatory, seated among Montgomery's prized orchids, the glass-paneled room, usually so warm with filtered sunlight and greenery, felt chilled by the tension between mother and daughter. Penelope sat hunched on a wrought iron bench, clutching a damp handkerchief, her eyes red, rimmed from weeping. Her mother, Mrs. Agatha Fairmont, stood beside her like a column of disapproval, stiff backed lips pressed into a line so tight it could cut glass. Miss Fairmont, Morrison begging, his tone uncharacteristically gentle as he consulted his notepad. We need to ask you about last evening after dinner. Where did you go home? Penelope murmured, mother, and I went straight home to our apartment. Morris Fairmont answered more crisply. We retired. Immediate Telepelli had a long day on set and was quite fatigued. Poirot studied the girl, his gaze soft but piercing. You seemed very fond of Mr. Montgomery, mademoiselle. He encouraged you, did he not? Penelope's eyes filled again, and fresh tears slipped silently down her cheeks. He was wonderful, kind, patient, he said. I had real talent, that he wanted to help him become a star. Penelope, her mother said, sharply composed fist. This isn't the time. But Penelope wasn't listening. He believed in me when he looked at me. I felt like I mattered. Morrison shot a glance at Poirot. Sounds like your feelings for him were more than professional. I loved him, she said simply, the words tumbling out like something long held back. Mrs. Fairmont inhaled sharply. Penelope was older, yes. Penelope continued, as if she hadn't heard. But he saw something in me. He stayed late to coach him on my scenes. He listened. He cared. Poirot leaned in slightly, his voice coaxing. And did he return those affections? Penelope nodded slowly at first. I thought he was just being kind, but then, 3 weeks ago, after filming, kissed me. The silence was immediate and sharp. Morse Fairmont's expression rose gold. Poirot said quietly. We started meeting in private, my dressing room, his office. He said we had to be discreet. People wouldn't understand. Her voice faltered. We biku meklos. You were having an affair. Morrison asked carefully. It wasn't an affair, Penelope said with sudden heat. It was love. And then the explosion came. Merce Vermont's hand moved so quickly it was a blur, a sharp crack of palm against cheek that echoed across the glassling. You little fool, she hissed. You stupid, naive little fool. He was using you just like all the others. Penelope gasped, her hand flying to her cheeks, eyes wide with betrayal. No, he loved me. He told me he was engaged to Evelyn St. Clair. Mrs. Fairmont snapped. Everyone knew it, whether they admitted it or not. You were a Diane satisfaction. I felt an uncomfortable knot twist in my chest. The rawness of it, the personal devastation, the public unraveling, was difficult to witness. Poirot, however, remained composed. Madame, you were aware of the engagementers Fairmont's voice was clipped. I suspected. I saw the way he looked at her thesis door meetings. The gossip. I warned Penelope, but she wouldn't listen. You knew. Penelope turned toward her mother, wounded. You knew, and you didn't tell. Ma'am, thought you'd come to your senses, but you lied to me. You sneaked off like some stage door hussy. I was trying to protect you from exactly this, Miss Fairmont, Morrison said, breaking the tension. When was the last time you saw Montgomery alone? Penelope wiped her face with shaking hands. Yesterday, late afternoon, before dinner, I went to see him. He seemed distinct, cold. I asked him what was wrong, and he said, we'd talk after the film wrapped. The things were complicated. And how did that make you feel? Kua asked gently. Penelope's voice cracked like my world was ending. I could tell he was pulling away. I begged him to explain, but he just said he needed to think about what was best for everyone. Mrs. Fairmont crossed her arms. Her fury had cooled into something more calculated. He was preparing to discard her. Like I warned men like Montgomery, don't marry girls like Penelope. They take what they want and leave ruin behind. Penelope's sobs returned in full, her shoulders trembling. It wasn't like that, she whispered. He said, I meant something, that we had a future as we exited the conservatory. It struggled to shake the image of Penelope's devastation and her mother's slap echoing through the greenhouse. Kaya, shot fired in anger. Good Lord, I said softly. That girl was completely taken in by Montgomery and the mother. She was like a blade drawn indeed. Manami Poirot said thoughtfully. A young woman scorned is one thing, but a mother seeking to restore her daughter's dignity after such public shame, that, I think, is a motive far more dangerous. He shivered. I had seen love turn to hatred before, but not often so swiftly or so silently. Chapter 5. A tapestry of Lisa's. The afternoon shadows lengthened across Montgomery's mansion. Poirot and Inspector Morrison retreated to the study to compare their notes. The red stain on the mahogany desk seemed to Telemachus with its dark reminder of the morning's grim discovery, while the faint scent of expensive cologne, stilling art in the air, a ghostly presence of secrets yet to be unraveled. Morrison spread his notepad across a small table, brow furrowed in concentration. Well, Mr. Poirot, we've got ourselves quite the collection of suspects, each with motive, means, and opportunity. School settled into a leather chair, my mind reeling from the afternoon's revelation. Senate Inspector Montgomery was juggling more than a few dangers. Liaison secretly engaged, involved in an affair, and under threat from a former petitioner turned bitter rival. Poirot paced with characteristic precision, his gray eyes distant and thoughtful. We Hastings. But as always, the challenge is to separate the wheat from the chaff. Let us review our suspects. Morrison nodded. Victor Langley admits being here past midnight, had financial motives, and was blackmailing Montgomery over the secret contingent. Poirot shook his head slightly. Langley profits from secrets, not from silencing them. Dead men pay no debts. As he sighed, what about Jenkins? I asked. 15 years of loyal service, but simmering bitters, plus knowledge of the house in Montgomery's habits. Poole, no Dita, classic suspect, yet. Jenkins had many chances, so why act? Now Morrison turned a page. Then there's Julian Drake. Jealous lover aware of Montgomery's troubles, openly threatening exposure, he claimed ignorance of the engagement, but no longer, Poole said quietly. He knew, learned it only days ago, and it broke his heart, his love for Mademoiselle. Sinclair is as tangled as his hatred for Montgomery frowned. That changes everything. He had motive, and he's emotionally, volatilely cold. He'd have acted out of desperation. Possibly, Poirot agreed. Yet, would he kill before confirming his suspicions? And would Evelyn risk losing him so violently? Morrison looked up sharply. Speaking of Evelyn Sinclair, she is calculating. She feared Montgomery was reconsidering their arrangement. Would she kill to keep him tethered, or, Poirot said softly, to prevent him from announcing a different engagement? Shivered. You mean Penelope? Surely not. She seemed the least so young, so vulnerable. Ah, but consider the timing, Poirot, said voice. Dropping Penelope spoke of Montgomery's distance yesterday. Talk off complications. What if he had fallen for her? What if the innocent young actress was about to change everything? Morrison scribbled furiously. That would give motive to both women. Evelyn to protect her position, Penelope to eliminate a rivaler. Poirot said quietly, Madame, is Fairmont driven to protect her daughter from ruin? Room fell silent. Mrs. Fairmont's cold fury had been chilling, but it was the faint scent of exotic perfume still lingering in the air, and the dagger itself, ornate and theatrical. It caught P.'s keen attention. This murder was staged, he declared, to mislead us, to suggest jealousy or desperation, when, in truth, it was a careful performance. Morrison frowned. You think the killer wanted us looking at the obvious suspects? Precisely. The killer's cleverness lay, suspicion away from herself. I leaned forward, breath held. Then, Yachno, who did it? Poirot smiled enigmatically. I have my suspicions, mon ami, but suspicions alone are not proof. We must set a trap to watch how our murderer reacts. Morrison raised an eyebrow. A trap? We tonight, after dinner, in the drawing room, I will announce my findings. The murderer will reveal themselves by their own hand. As we left the study, a cold weight settled over me. The tangled web of love, betrayal, and anger seemed almost too complex to untangle. I asked quietly as we walked toward the door, Are you certain who killed Montgomery? He paused, his hand on the doorknob, turning with that familiar twinkle in his eyes. May we? Hastings, the killer, has played their part with great skill, but tonight the final act will expose the truth and reveal that sometimes the quietest heart harbors the darkest secret. Stage was set as dusk fell over the Hollywood hills. So truth waited patiently, ready to shatter illusions and unveil the murderer lurking in plain sight. Chapter 6. The stage, is Seth's drawing room, was charged with a palpable tension as the suspects took their seats, eyes darting, nervous live fingers twitching the heavy curtains, drawn, plunging the room into soft twilight, while the flicker of the fireplace cast dancing shadows across tense faces. Poole stood quietly for a moment, folding his hands with the grace of a conductor about to lead a final movement. Madame Cezio, he began, voice calm but commanding, we have come to the conclusion of this tragic tale. Each of you, in your own way, had reason to desire Monsieur Montgomery's silence, but as always, truth is hidden beneath layers of deception. He looked first to Victor Langley, tablet mailer. Moo Langley, you admit to being here well past midnight, and you sought to profit from secrets, financial ruin, perhaps even destruction yet. Your greed depends on Montgomery's continued existence. Dead men, as you say, pay no debts. Your threat was to expose, not to kill. Longley's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Poirot's gaze turned to Jenkins. A Valentine servant, you bore resentment for years, watching your former courting as success from the shadows, but you had countless opportunities. Why choose tonight? Why now? Jenkins' eyes lowered the weight of his bitterness, evident, because you were not. The killer, Poirot concluded. Firmly eyes shifted as Poirot addressed Julian Drake. Mr. Drake, you presented yourself as a man blinded by jealousy and suspicion, unaware of the true engagement, but during our interview, I observed your carefully concealed knowledge, your fury over the betrayal, and your devotion to Mademoiselle Sinclair. You threatened Montgomery. Openly passionate men can be dangerous. Julian's hands curled into fists, but he remained silent. Yet, would you act before confronting the truth? Would you kill without certainty? Poirot asked, softly. Next, Evelyn Sinclair, the poised fiancée. Mademoiselle Sinclair, you spoke coldly. Of love as a contract, a business arrangement. The threat of losing Montgomery's favor would jeopardize your ambitions. Your position? Would you kill to protect your future? Her eyes were steady, unflinching. Poole's voice softened as he looked toward Mrs. Fairmont. Ma'am, Fairmont, your fury was fierce and raw when Penelope's secret came to light. You wished to protect your daughter, to shield her from ruin and heartbreak. But protection can become prison. Her face was unreadable, resolute. Now, Poirot said slowly, turning to Penelope. We come to you, Mademoiselle Fairmont. Penelope's breath caught. Her eyes were red-rimmed, vulnerable. Have been portrayed as the innocent and genuine, too young, too fragile to commit such a crime. But you lied about the timing of your last meeting with Mr. Montgomery. Tears began to form. I was scared, she whispered. Scared of what, Mademoiselle? If I lost him, I would lose everything. The hope, the dream he gave me and loved him. I still do. Poole stepped closer, his voice gentle but probing. Love is a powerful thing, but it can blind us to reason. You told us Ophis distant words, the talk of endings and futures. You were desperate, abandoned Ned Braid. Penelope's hands trembled. He was going to leave me. He told me he had to think about what was best for everyone. And did that thought not terrify you, Poole? A sketch nodded, choking back a sob. The dagger, Poirot said, lifting the ornate weapon carefully, was taken from the theater props, the very place. You spent hours rehearsing and dreaming. The perfume, exotic and unmistakable, lingered on your garments, found at the scene. He let the silence deepen. You staged the scene, Poole said softly, an attempt to divert suspicion to others. The blackmailer, the jealous exarcher, the protective mother, but none had access like you. The room was still as death. You, Penelope, driven by love so fierce and fragile. It turned to rage. Penelope looked up, eyes wide, face please. I did it. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to listen, to stay but one. He said he had to end things. I lost control. I didn't mean to kill him, but I couldn't let him go. Not after all he promised, not after the way he made Methville, after Mother retired that evening. I slipped out with the dagger I'd taken from the studio props. I knew he'd be working late in his study. Okay, he confirmed our affair was ending, that he intended to marry Evelyn. I struck him in desperation. Our shoulders shook with quiet sobs. The room was stunned into silent saving. Mrs. Fairmont seemed shaken. The confident mask shattered. Love, Poirot said softly, can inspire both the most beautiful and the dark stacks. Your performance was flawless, so much so that few suspected the pre-suspected. Calm surface, the room remained silent as the weight of Penelope's confession settled. Over them, the fragile, unlu, long seen as victim, was the architect of this tragedy. Greatest performance, it seemed, had been her. On Chapter 7, Epilogue. We escorted Penelope away, her sobs echoing softly through the grand hall. I found myself wrestling with a heavy sense of sorrow. The sweet girl I thought I knew, fragile, innocent, hopeful, had been but a carefully crafted illusion. Beneath it, delicate veneer, lay a storm of passion and despair, fierce enough to destroy a man. I glanced at Mrs. Fairmontoil's pale face, spoke of shattered trust and heartbreak. How well do we truly know those closest to us? How often do love and desperation twist the brightest souls into shadows? Poirot's words lingered in my mind, that love can inspire both beauty and artness, and that sometimes the greatest performance is the one played out behind closed doors. Then the end justice would be done. But I couldn't help feeling that in a place like Hollywood, where dreams and deception dance so closely together, the line between victim and villain is far thinner than it seems. And as the evening shadows deepened over Montgomery's mansion, I've wondered how many more tragedies lay hidden beneath the glimmering surface of the silver screen music. As the lights dim over Montgomery's mansion, Hercule Poirot's relentless logic has stripped away the glamour to reveal a heart shattered by love's cruel illusion. Penelope Fairmont stands, unmasked, her desperate act of passion vowed by a trace of perfume and a stolen dagger. The Hollywood affair reminds us that beneath the silver screens dazzled the darkest secrets fester in the quiet stalls. We hope this journey through betrayal and redemption has gripped you, Durlestoners. Did you spot the killer before Poirot, or were you swayed by the Avenue charm? Share your thoughts below. If the Hollywood affair has enthralled you, please like and subscribe to Stories Cafe for more tales of suspense. Support a craft.